So we've been busy trying to resolve the issues. There are thousands of issues that have come to our attention. As you see for yourselves, people are not shy. But we still have to try to resolve them. We've put in place a mechanism to follow up right up to the ministerial level, and quite a few of the issues have already been resolved, and we're in the process of resolving others. So I want to urge people to continue to utilize this mechanism, but with that understanding that there are things that we can do, and there are other things that we may not be able to do immediately. Now, a lot has been written about the promises we've made and our ability to keep these promises. And since I'm fresh back from the outreach in Region 10, I want to draw your attention to what we are often confronted. Partnership Fund, that the Linden Mabura Road project was not a priority project for their party. And if they were successful in the upcoming elections, was not a priority project for their party. Now, we did have a conversation with their party. And my concern at that time was that we selected a project. APNU was going forward with a project that was not the greatest priority at that time. Now, the Linden Mabura link was not the most feasible part of the link from Soestdijk to Brazil. They linked the Soestdijk Linden component. 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 They linked the Soestdijk plan without any plan or financing to do the Linden Soestdijk highway. Without any and my point that if you look at any feasibility study would show that had a great impact. If you look at any feasibility study and particularly those had a great impact. And when he got into office, he decided that it's impossible to make the shift at that time. Because so what did we do? We then decided the shift that we had to find because so money now to do the part from that we had to find because to money now and I explained that when I was on the retreat that we right now have alone before the Islamic and back to 100 and right now have alone before the Islamic shifted to June, but it has shifted to September. So now we can pave all the way from Soestdijk all the way to Mabura. But the most feasible part of that road still remains the Linden Soestdijk component. You have over 1,000 vehicles a day that traverse the section. When you do a feasibility study and calculate the economic feasibility, the stream of benefits, that would be the conclusion. But now we've taken care of that. And we are also doing the bridge across the river. Now we said they were going to do that bridge, but in abstract. We are going to go to tender. We are preparing the documents now that will go out shortly for design build contract for 4-lane structure across at Wisma across the river. So this is totally untrue. It creates the impression that we are going to cancel the road and only because the British wanted, otherwise the road continued. We were trying to get the resources done, shifted first of all to the Linden Soestdijk junction, and then to raise the financing to go further. That is from Linden to Mabura, which is not used so much by as many people. They then said in the same release that in the COVID grant across the country, in Linden, people were given only one allocation per household, but across the country, PPP people got it by just providing their ID card, so implying that there are multiple grants given in single households. This is not factual. They can't substantiate with a single bit of fact. But again, this whistleblowing sort of racism, because they mislead the people in Linden. They say to them, you're treated differently than the rest of the country. This is an absolute lie. It said here in this, a mere $9 million has been budgeted for agro-processing facility in Linden, while $7.3 billion has been allocated for Enmore. Now, no money has been allocated for Enmore in the budget. Zero. What we have allocated is $1.2 billion for an industrial estate in the Buxton Falls NDC at Falls. An industrial estate for the East Coast. But they said $7.3 billion has been allocated for Enmore and mere $9 million for Linden. But remember, most people will not see this nationally, so they will now respond. But the people in Linden would read this. That is what Norton was doing, distributing these flyers. They said the PPP has dismantled the 5B programs that benefited children across Region 10. Now, for someone to say this, and when we've now reinstituted the 10,000 grant and taking it up to 25,000 per child in both public schools and private schools, clearly is delusional, but they actually said it. They said they gave over 1,000 scholarships in the 5 years where youths in Region 10 benefited. Now, 1,000 scholarships in 5 years, we've done 6,000 in the first year, and young people in Region 10 benefited. Under the APNU AFC, athletes from Region 10 receive house lots for their performance. Not regular people. They didn't do any housing for ordinary people. We're going to build 1,000 homes, and we're going to allocate maybe nearly 2,000 house lots just in that region. But they gave a couple of scholarship house lots for athletes in the region, apart from the APNU high officials taking all the lands for themselves, the Figueres and the others. They said under the APNU AFC, old age pension was increased from $7,500 to $20,500. Now, if you look at this, a person telling such a blatant lie would say this is over 100%. Now, I just asked my staff to check how much of what the rate was in 2014. It was actually $13,125, but they said it's $7,500. That's what their document has. So if you look at the growth from 2014 to 2020, it cost the Treasury $5 billion. In the first 2 years alone, that is on an annual basis for pensioners increase, it's now $5.4 billion under the PPP. And when we double old age pension by 2025, which we promised to do, it will be an annual increase of about $14.4 billion more. But a blatant lie again. Now, I can go through every lie in the flyer. For example, it says PPP not giving enough oil money to the people, distributing it elsewhere, but not giving money to the people in Linden. Questions about the voters list again, not mentioning that 460,000 actually voted of the 660,000 on the list, and that under APNU in 2015 when they won, the same list was in place and had about 200,000 persons more than who actually voted. So the leader of the opposition was doing this in Linden. Instead of trying to talk about progress, he was busy spreading lies on the very day that we were there to try to look at the interests of the people in the country. And this is what they do. It's racism on the slide. It's coded. You know, you're being treated badly. Oh, sugar workers are getting a second severance. It's not true. Sugar workers are not getting a second severance. When the bauxite workers were laid off, I actually increased the severance, more than double their severance. They know that. There is a coded racism and a set of lies that they spread. So I hope that people, when I met and I spoke with the gathering here, I urge the people in Linden and elsewhere to read for themselves. And if you only were to examine this, you will see that much of what APNU says is not factual. For example, Annette Ferguson, in a letter to the newspaper, said that I've been promises being made by Jagdeo during PPP outreaches are inconsistent with the 2022 budget estimate. Start news. So she said, where is the money for the community roads? Well, on page 44 of the budget speech, if Anna Ferguson could really looked at the budget, but I can't expect her to look at the estimates. Might be a bit too complex. So even if she read the budget speech of the minister, he said on page 44, additionally, some 15.2 billion is allocated for the construction and rehabilitation of urban and community roads. That's written, that's in the speech. And then she can go to the estimate and she'll find it there. So everything that we've mentioned are covered by allocations in the 2022 budget. But to write the whole article, several pages are left, just to prove a point where she didn't even read the budget speech, sat through it, the parliament, and didn't even read the speech. This is the sort of thing that we have to deal with in the country every single day. And it becomes a bit debilitating, but by now the country knows that we're not going to get better from AFC. Now, I'm going to quickly take you through a couple of issues that have been in the media for quite a while now. On the oil and gas side, as you know, we're about to wrap up the audit for the 1999-2017 period. I think that should be done in a matter of weeks. And but the findings, once that's done, we will inform the public of the findings. Contract for the audit from 2018 to 2020 has been approved and signed now, and we're going to begin work in June. By the end of the third quarter, we should have the report. The audit should be completed, the first report. And this was done with a consortium of local Guyanese. You recall us talking about building local capacity with a consulting firm from the United States of America and another UK technical firm, Martingale Consultants and SGS from the UK. So we expect the audit to be done, and also through the process of doing this audit, we will build local capacity. We are currently working at preparing for the auction in September of this year, as we had promised. We are yet to determine whether there will be a national oil company. I see there has been quite a bit of debate surrounding this issue, and it's good that we have that debate, because we're still in the process of making a determination as to where we will go. And in the debate, at least in Maine, from the serious sources, we're getting a list of concerns that are universally known where it relates to national oil companies. Questions about the time it takes to develop, about an overload on domestic capacity, that the corruption associated with many national oil companies around the world, the examples are not encouraging. More importantly, from our side, we've been adding some we've been putting some additional concern about national oil companies. Not the most obvious ones that I mentioned that have been written about by everyone, and not the fact that the IMF said that we shouldn't do it, because we don't take IMF lectures as gospel in this country. From our own, given what we have been looking at, the examination of the situation, we believe that having an old-style model national oil company at this stage could present major difficulties for the country. So, first of all, with net zero target by 2050, it becomes harder to raise money globally for national oil companies. That if we were to vest all of the assets, remaining assets, in a national oil company, it could lead to too much concentration and slow down the process of exploration. What I mean is that having just one strategic partner to work with would mean a much slower process of exploring for improving our resources in an era when we have to accelerate the proving of these resources and possibly get them out before the world totally decarbonizes. So that is the additional concern of ours. And therefore, let me say right at the beginning, the model that we are talking about, should we go down this route, is not an old-style NOC. It is about more a passive ownership of shares in companies in exchange for some of the offshore blocks that we have given. So how does that work? In exchange for the offshore blocks that we will allocate. So how would that work, that model? We just simply say that we're getting a strategic partner, we're taking a share of the company, but we have no control over operations or management except for the controls given to shareholders through ownership. It's through passive ownership by virtue of owning shares. So that's the model. And notice I'm just telling you this because I want you to, especially the media, to understand what the thinking in government is at this point in time. No decision has been made. We have a lot of cons, a few pros, and the only pro, the one that would tilt this in favor of the establishment of not a traditional style NOC, but an NOC with a more passive form of ownership, is whether, and this is the key question here, whether we can get more revenue for the country that will come from a modified PSA. Because a modified PSA will give us a greater share of the revenue from oil and gas activities. Because the current stable PSA gives us a particular percentage of all that revenue. The new one that we're working on will give us a higher percentage. Now, can we get that and still get even more for the country by virtue of ownership of any shares in these companies? So those are the variables right now that are being explored, and once that is done, then a decision has been made. So the debate is welcome. It's a welcome debate in the newspapers. It may be seen as critical of the government. It is not. I don't mind people pointing this out, the negatives, because we have to address these issues when we make a decision. And I just want people to understand that we are taking these issues seriously. On the other hand, so whilst we welcome that debate, we've had a lot of crazy things being said too. Like you have Kaitro News with some guy called, what's his name? Sanzillo, yeah. Who've been saying some things that I wonder if he's been thinking before saying these things. So first of all, let's deal with this question about what the IMF recommended we should use our oil revenue to do. He suggested that we departed from what the IMF recommended that we should do with the oil resources. And they said that we should use it to close the fiscal deficit, reduce national debt, and save for future generations. That is the IMF prescription. Let me, before I go into why this is not a sensible or a feasible option for Ghana, nor will it bring the greatest benefit to our people. Let me give you a couple of facts. Now, Norway is used as the gold standard, in fact, the diamond standard for management of oil and gas money globally. They're considered to have the best model. They have the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world, and everyone uses Norway as the model. So Norway started producing oil in 1967. It established for the first time a sovereign wealth fund in 1996. 30 years after Norway started to produce oil and gas, Norway then established the Sovereign Wealth Fund. Norway's per capita GDP was $2,514 in 1967. In 1996, the year it first established a sovereign wealth fund, like what we have a natural resources fund, its per capita GDP was in excess of $37,000. Now, today, our per capita GDP, it moved from the early 90s, about $300-400, to today it's $9,000, about $9,000. So Norway waited until its per capita GDP clearly $37,000. 30 years after it started producing, then it started saving for the future, because it recognized that you had to build national capability first before you started saving for the future. From day one, we are going to start saving. We established a saving fund, there's no natural resources fund. And we now establish a sliding scale formula where once revenue exceeds 500 million per year, then that's a de minimis level. We start sharing, saving a growing percentage of the amount received. So clearly the good policy is that you have to invest in your country first. You have to have, let me put it the other way around, you have to have world-class infrastructure. You have to be able to address people's basic needs, education, healthcare, community roads, secure the country before you start saving for the future in any major way. That is what those countries determine. We adopted to save a bit for the future from the beginning. So the IMF model here, what they said, is pay down the deficit. If you reduce the deficit now, in this stage, that means we can't build our highways. We can't build the 4-lane roads necessary to take our traffic out. We can't build new power plants. We can't build the ports necessary to catapult our economy to the next level. We can't build the world-class hospitals and schools and universities that we need to grow our economy in the future. The IMF core job has been balancing budgets and making sure that you have balance of payment sustainability. They were set up as an organization to ensure that the external accounts, the BOP, was in balance. They're not a development institution. They won't work on development plans for the country. So paying down the deficit at this time is a pro policy, and it is absolutely not needed at this time. Secondly, reducing the debt. Now, our debt figures, the total debt in the United States of America is about 100% of GDP, about 101% of GDP. In Europe, it's about 88% of GDP. Our total debt is less than 30% of GDP, but external debt in Ghana is 16% of GDP. Our capacity to borrow is significantly greater than most of these countries, and it's one of the lowest in the world and in this hemisphere. And it came down from 900% of GDP in the early days. So we don't have to reduce our debt further. We have to borrow for our highways now, but on careful terms. That's what we are doing, our hospitals, etc. Our capacity to repay is greatly enhanced. This guy says this. He has done no debt sustainability analysis, which we do constantly for Ghana. But he sits somewhere in the world and says, oh, they shouldn't be borrowing. With this utter nonsense. So again, paying down that debt would not allow you to build out the infrastructure for the future, but he says we must do this. Then he says further that we should. The third point is that every Guyanese every citizen owes ExxonMobil $9 million Ghana dollars. Now, I don't owe Exxon no $9 million. Do you owe, any of you here owe Exxon $9 million? So nobody, I don't know about that. The only debts that this country has to repay is debts contracted or guaranteed by the state. And I told you that's only 16% of GDP. No debt contracted by Exxon or any of these companies are guaranteed or we are party by the government, nor are we party to those debts. So you don't have to pay the citizen of this country. So he claims further that all these debts have to be repaid and everything else before we'll get any money. So that's not true again, because if you look at even the original agreement that was signed since 1999, you will see that there is a cutoff point for cost recovery from revenue of 75%. So 75% of revenue goes to cost recovery, including servicing, debts, and everything else. And 25% from day one becomes available as profit oil, of which we will get 12.5%, and then a 2 percentage point as royalty, which gives us about 14.5% from day one. So right now we have FPSOs that will probably, we have given licenses out that would guarantee production just above 800,000 barrels per day from the two license permits, Payara and Yellowtail. Once those projects go ahead, at about $50 per barrel, our share will be worth maybe about $2 billion per year. And if it's $100 a barrel, now today price is $120. Let's say it's $100. It's about $4 billion per annum. The government share will be. Now that is more than twice the size of our total debt now. 1 year's revenue in the future will be about more than twice the size of our current level of debt. That is stock of debt. In 1 year revenue, we can take half a year's revenue and pay off all the country's debt. Now, that we guarantee. So I don't know where this, it's totally, I don't want to call it lunatic because I don't like to call people lunatic, but it's lunacy. Maybe not a person, I don't want to call a person a lunatic, but this is lunacy that passes off as analysis. No, they're just confusing the hell out of people with this nonsense. Now, apart from that, it is not true that we owe $9 million each to Exxon, nor do we have to pay that back. We're forgetting the contribute and that there will be a revenue flow to the treasury. You have to look at the contribution of the sector to the rest of the economy. The gas that will come in, that would allow us to generate cheaper power, which will have a major impact on our industries and consumers. The ability to produce the liquids that would allow us to cut cost of living through the cooking gas. The business through the other linkages in the economy through the local content law that will generate employment, maybe 5,000 people directly employed, and a lot of business for local. That has an impact on the economy. The de-risking of Guyana through, say, the expansion in the service sector, new hotels, more services to people, they contribute to a greater well-being and greater economic opportunities for people. So this is the total effect. I'm not looking at just the direct flows to the treasury. None of this comes over in the analysis. So I would urge you, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I can go through it in great details. It's just utter nonsense, and it's been raging. I don't know where they find these people. From some International Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis. It is a fraud. Everything written so far is fraudulent. It's on the other question again, this brings me to the point about the urging not to renew. There's been a lot of people internationally and locally who've been urging the EPA not to renew the permit for the Stabroek field license. Effectively, that would shut down the production of oil and gas in the country. So that means we lose all of these revenues and we lose everything else. So I see some celebrities and everybody who live in their countries that are expanding oil and gas production now. They want us to stop it here in Guyana. They don't even have a voice to stop it in their own countries. In fact, they're expanding. And I believe many of them, wittingly or unwittingly, they work for the lobby in these countries, the oil and gas producing lobbies, because they will. The world needs the fossil fuel now. That's why the price is $120 a barrel. That's why it's going up. There's a scarcity of oil and crude oil, and therefore they would reap all the windfalls, the rich countries in the world. So they want to shut it down in Guyana. We are causing climate change. We are destroying the planet. But every day, the greenhouse gases that get churned out of the developed world is maybe tens of thousands times more than our total greenhouse gas in Guyana. But they pick on Guyana because it's a small country. These NGOs and others, they pick on them, and they have some of the local people who make a living out of this too. It looks good on their CVs. They're fighting big bad ExxonMobil in Guyana, and they raise money and they get employment activity. So don't waste your time on these people. They would have us suffer forever, and including some who are now who are flying around in private jets. They were telling us they don't worry about greenhouse gas emissions when they fly around in private jets, but they want us to stop producing. The gas to energy project, we are now wrapping up. You know that 9 companies were pre-qualified. I think the lists were in the public domain. The 9 companies, they were listed in the public domain. This is after a long process. And the request for proposal will now go out before at the end of 2 weeks to these 9 companies to make the bids now for the power plant and the NGL facility. So we are hoping that that will happen very soon, and that we'll be able to move forward with this project that will transform the country's energy supply and also our supply of the liquids that we use. It's a very feasible project that would allow us to expand our economy, to cut our carbon emissions, and to ensure that that our development strategy gets implemented. Now, I would like to say something about this. A lot of the companies that are tendering, they have local representatives who have been saying they have agreements to represent these companies. And they're trying to get these companies to meet with government officials. Now let me make it clear. If any of these companies believe that meeting government officials would have, and anybody represented that to them, that they can arrange for them to meet government officials and it will improve their chances when the bids are evaluating, they're wasting their money by paying these local representatives, and they're wasting their time too. Because it's a lobbying industry. We've seen it with this process, an overload of people calling to set up meetings. We don't want to meet with anyone. We want to meet with them. And if these local people are representing this to the foreign companies, that somehow they will get a preference here, the answer is no. We've seen this in some other cases. We've seen this in other cases. It's going on and on. A few months ago, we've had cause to had someone arrested just here in this building. This was someone that met me in the oil and gas conference, Guyanese, and he took a picture with me. He then went to a number of people, collected money from them, told them he had a close relationship with me, he could arrange to see me. I've never seen him in my life. And at the meeting he asked, at the conference he asked us to meet with me. So I said, contact my secretary. So luckily we got this information before. He then showed up here because my secretary called and she arranged a meeting. He showed up with another person that he was conning, bringing to the meeting. And he was arrested right here. So if this is going on, it has become almost like an industry now, where people are claiming they represent companies and all of that sort of thing, and I don't know what they're representing to these people. So if anyone is stupid enough to lose your money by thinking you will get any preferences because somebody arranged a meeting with some policymaker, well, it's your loss. It's your loss. So we're there because I've seen it happening here. We're extremely happy that most of the big projects are moving now too. As you have seen, the bridge was signed, the bridge across the Damar River. We have just gone out for the first phase of the Parika to Schoonard Road. And this phase will make a big difference. It's about $10 billion, about 50 million US. The bypass between Crane to the bridge, a 4-lane road, several, maybe 40 something or so bridges, and that will start very soon. As you know, the contract for the 4-lane to Diamond has already been awarded. I mentioned to you the Linden-Soestdijk Highway, Spain, that's before the ISDB board. We're opening bids for the Berbice Road, Amsterdam to Molson Creek. This is removing the utilities from the road so we can pave that road. The bridges to Lethem have already been tendered. So quite a few of these things. The contract for the Ogle to Eccles bypass has been done. I just wanted you to understand that we're moving rapidly on these transformative projects too. as we move on addressing other concerns that people have. The hospitals, we were in negotiations with those. I mentioned the gas to energy project. Amila, we have been in discussion with the company since November last year. Where the discussions and negotiations are very difficult. And as of April 22nd, they wrote us saying that they're having a hard time doing the boot contract and they want to shift to a EPC plus finance, that the government finances the project and then there would be the EPC contractor. We're in the negotiations, we're still trying because to get them to meet the commitment that they bid for. But you know how this started. They started with Site Global, which is a subsidiary of Blackstone, choosing China Rail. And then the project didn't go through, we retendered, and they came out at about 7.7 cents per kilowatt hour. Under Blackstone, when Blackstone had chosen them, they were about 10 point something cents per kilowatt hour. But now they're saying they can't go ahead with the build, own, operate, transfer. They want to change the basis to an EPC plus F finance. If we can change that, if we can't get it done under the boot, we can't proceed with the company. We'll have to retender. They will not be able to conclude the contract because that is what the tender was about, a build, own, operate, transfer model, not an EPC finance model. And therefore, in the last maybe 6 months or so, we've been struggling to reach an agreement. So we are now going to have to give a deadline and then cancel if they can't proceed as the original model. So that we may have a setback there on that, but on the solar panels, remember that's our money. So those 35 megawatts will go out to tender very soon. That is for Linden, Essequibo, and Berbice. So the gas to energy project is running apace. This one is going to be tendered to 35 megawatts. A mile we are stuck now with the possibility of having to retender because they can't conclude on the basis at which we tender. So that's on the energy side. So that might be a bit of a setback, but on the other hand, we're moving full steam ahead. So I just wanted to bring you up to date on those issues. This is the Fao Draft Report. The reason the minister has not released it as yet is not because there's a conspiracy, but it's a second draft. And until it's finalized by the FAO, we now release it. But this is what it says on page 33. I read it back again. Currently, there are no major construction activities associated with the oil and gas sector in Guyana that are directly affecting marine or coastal habitats. Oil is being exploited from drill ships or floating production platforms rather than permanent rigs, and no pipelines are being used or under construction. The floating drilling rigs might serve as an aggregation point for pelagic fishing. In the same way, fish aggregation devices attract fish. Current oil and gas related activities are taking place far offshore, well beyond the major fishing zones on the continental shelf. Any impact of the floating oil and gas infrastructure is therefore only likely to affect positively or negatively the industrial line fishery for large pelagic fishes. While production in this fishery dropped in 2020, it fully recovered in 2021. Some edits and stuff, because it's a second draft, but that's the main report. And so there is no big conspiracy. They looked at it, and they came up with this conclusion. For but I can end it. Thank you.
Vice President, your currently on council, if you record. Absolutely.
So we're hoping to finalize maybe in a matter of weeks, because we have rolled out consultation strategy across the country in indigenous communities, in the regions, etc. We have quite a few comments that we are processing now to see how we can improve what we have for the better. And so we are taking each suggestion seriously, and we're analyzing if the suggestion can add value to what we already have. We anticipate that as soon as we complete this, with the Parliament would have, as you asked, the Parliament would have a look at it and debate it. But we're very worried about the mindset of the opposition now. They are very negative on everything. Simultaneously, we are working to get our forest carbon on the market, to maximize the benefits that we receive from our forest carbon credits. This is only right and just, given that the world pays nearly $90 per ton for carbon in another part of the world, and they are unwilling now to even guarantee a price of $10 for forest carbon. And a ton of carbon from whatever its source or wherever in the world that is emitted has the same impact on global warming. So our argument is that the developed world has to start creating incentives and markets for products supplied by the developing world. They can't want to treat developing world mitigation solutions as though it could be solved through philanthropy or goodwill, as they did in COP26, when there was just a declaration without allocation of resources to say deforestation must end by 2030. The other sources of emission, they get a lot of money to abate those, but they don't want to put in the forest-based solutions. And as you know, deforestation and land use change contributes about 16% of total greenhouse gases. So our arguments have been that you will never achieve net zero without addressing this primary source of emission too. And right now we don't see, in spite of the formation of LEAF, we don't see enough incentives in the market for countries like ours, Guyana, Gabon, Suriname, and others, to really to maximize benefits. Now, we have already decided through the money remaining from the first fund, the Norwegian fund, that apart from I had a meeting with the Norwegian ambassador and the officials who came here. We spoke a lot about the model building and about the future ways of intermediating these resources in a less bureaucratic manner without harming the transparency in the use of the resources for the future. And we've also indicated our intention to utilize the remaining on-program sum for the adaptation measures, and that is why we've launched these consultations across regions 2, 3, 5, and 6, where we're looking at structures similar to what we did at Hope Canal, the Hope Canal, that is an ability to manage water and to get it out to the Atlantic so as quickly as possible, given the changes in the intensity of rainfall and the amount of accumulation we can have in very short periods where there's inadequate storage and the rivers and the drainage canals, they can't store water in any major way. So this is where we're utilizing some of those resources on adaptation. So as I said, the LCDS, the expanded LCS would focus heavily on adaptation, preparing for the future, climate proofing our economy, even if we have money to spend some money from the oil and gas sector to climate proof our economy. Then secondly, heavy emphasis on water conservation management or watersheds, a whole range of other issues, integrated water management plan aggressively pursued. The biodiversity component, but just now expanding it in a major way to involve research and development and utilizing of the biodiversity of the country, not to preserve it in perpetuity, but also to bring some economic benefits to our people from using the biodiversity, but you have to use it in a sustainable manner. And then of course the forest carbon benefits. On the marine economy, which is part of the LCDS too, we are in a number of measures, including mangroves, etc., that can enhance the contribution of the marine economy, but take conservation issues out into that sphere now, because for a while it had been focused on largely on land and particularly in the forested areas. So we're getting feedback on all of these issues from various sources. Indigenous communities, some of them wanted to find out how much of the resources will be allocated. We have set aside 15% of whatever we earn will be given to indigenous communities. We made a commitment to FPIC that APNU just threw out the window. That's a free, prior, informed consent. We resuscitated the land titling program. A lot of these issues, we welcome the extensive feedback.
I have some questions of Audit, but on the court, your interest from the developed world in the final life.
So on that, the forest carbon the international framework. So my point is that given what I just said, that the developed world, particularly the leaders, although they recognize the importance of preserving forests to biodiversity and to a climate objective, this has not been matched by the resource flow necessary to support that. And if in the agreement that is the COP agreement, this is not reflected with support from the developed world, then the ability to create markets surrounding forest carbon, similarly as how markets surrounding other types of carbon have been created across the developed world. For example, the European Union emissions trading scheme in the UK and in other places. Then unless you have those formal markets in place, you're never going to see forest carbon trading at price approximating what's taking place in any of these markets. So clearly, much more work has to be done by the developed world in pushing these frameworks. And even when there is support for a framework like LEAF, often the mechanism is a bit almost governmentish, if there is such a word. It's almost like, the same bureaucratic sort of thing. For example, I said this to Norway. Now, we sold our forest carbon. We earn the money. It goes into the IDB as the intermediary institution. And then when we want to access our own money, we then have to go through not just Norway procedures, but the Inter-American Development Bank procedures that are like the same if you're accessing a loan or grant. Now, they're just safeguarding. They're the trustee for money we earn. The only thing they should really be doing is to ensure that the tendering process is transparent. But that is what I mean by most of these initiatives still surround multilateral type of intermediary mechanisms. And it's slowing down the interest in the development of the markets, but it's also killing interest in these initiatives. So we now have to work globally to ensure that happens. Now we have some of the best, in fact, if not the best quality forest carbon in the world. And I can say that with a great deal of confidence. Because we have had 10 years since the launch of the LCDS, 10 years of continuous monitoring, reporting, verification system, a continuous monitoring, reporting, verification system in place that has tracked the change in forest carbon in Guyana. And these have been internationally verified. So we have a strong track record in this regard. So on LEAF, when we made the proposal, it's one of the countries making proposal, and LEAF has been verifying these credits. So our credits will be verified credits that will be available to the market. And then we went up ahead with a request for proposals, which closed. That's a bidding process. So now we have received some bids basically, and we're in the discussion on those. And that would involve pricing issues and stuff like that. So notwithstanding what's happening globally, because of the quality of our forest carbon, and because we have acted early, and I told you, first year we got into office, I told you at the press conference here, that we're not just looking at credit from 2020 to 2025, we're going back to 2016, and trying to get paid for the missed opportunities that have caused.
Sir, could you say why has the order not been issued for the president to be engaged and what funds? And also, could you provide us with any details with respect to what happened to cushion the ongoing increase and so on? And quickly, thirdly, what reasons are being advanced by the Chinese company for not being in favor of the boot auction?
The starting, not that they're not in favor of it, they simply can't raise the financing, because that meant they had to build it, own it, and supply us the power at a particular price, and then 20 years after transfer it to the government for free. That was what they bid on. So they had to raise, so we would not have any debt. There would be no debt associated. So that model they're saying they can't pursue. So they want the government to contract the debt and use them as contractor. So we said we did not bid for that. If we have to do it that model, we'd have to go back to them. So that was one. On the cushioning, you know that the excise tax was 50%. So we reduced it to 0. We removed the excise tax. That is what we could have done, and that is what we did. because there isn't anything else that we can do at this stage. Nothing else at this stage. Because if that's the only thing that the government used to collect in terms of revenue, and there's zero revenue. We don't collect taxes now from people, down from 50% to zero. The other one, I'm not very familiar with this. You should talk to the Minister of Labor. That may be more his domain.
He says this with cabinet.
Okay, well then he would have to. I'm not been in cabinet for a while, so I'll have to find out a bit about why he said it's cabinet and what the whole of it is. I don't know.
And sir, quickly, is government in favor of having the matter of the contribution of the Chief Justice and the Chancellor be put in the agenda for discussions with the opposition leader?
This is in the domain of the President of the country. That's his responsibility, not opposition leader. And I've gone through a long period of this. Even when as president, I put some names to when they were in opposition happening, and never got approved. Never got approved for many, many years. So this sense of urgency now, with the accumulated urgency, I know how we suffered from it because of that. So the president has to examine track record and everything else before he makes up his mind as to who he wants to recommend. He has to examine. I don't think it's an automatic process. Therefore, if it's automatic, then a bad need for this cause. So whenever the president is ready, he will inform the opposition leader, and then the opposition leader will have a chance to express a view as to whether he agrees or not. If he does not agree, you cannot have the confirmation. If he does agree, then you have confirmation. That's the constitution of Guyana that everyone participated now in putting together. APNU, AFC, well, at that time I didn't even know they existed, or the whole country.
What's the motive of it? Did you just go for confirming the existing office orders? What's the motive?
I'm not. People mood. I'm not a psychiatrist to comment on people's mood, and I think people's mood changes every. Their moods their moods change every day. Come down and you have heavy traffic on the road one day, people's mood may change. So I'm not like.
But it's very likely to.
I think the PPP government will not make decisions based on the caprices associated with moods. They will make a decision, and the president will make a decision on the basis of studying the facts and the ability of people and what is good for the country, not on the side of the bed, wake up in the morning.
Clarification. On the Lisa 1 permit, I gather from what you said that this permit will be say whether there would have been any changes in the need for a new document, such as perhaps an example, an increase in the fine.
Yeah, there will be an increase in the fine.
Can you give a bit more detail?
No, I'm not giving more detail, just that there will be an increase.
Final 32 lets to compile audit, and the minister just stated that the operators would facilitate any sums that are not being appropriated auditing.
Facilitate sums like.
Yeah, they would not basically allow for the claims to be made. That they would allow for the claims to be made. Is that written, sir, or is that just a vocal commitment?
No. That's the purpose of the audit. That's the whole purpose of the audit.
Yeah, he said beyond the time frame that the operators would allow. Is that written or is that?
I dealt with the issue of timelines already. And I made it clear that the timelines in the contract with Exxon is agreed that none of those timelines will affect our ability to audit. That means if you don't do an audit, like within the first 2 years, then you lose the right to audit. So we have not lost the right to audit. Secondly, the purpose of the audit was to ensure what goes into the cost bank and what doesn't in their expenditure. So if we find in the audits expenditure being made that do not form part of the cost bank, then the adjustments would have to be made in the accounts. And so it's either the accounts would be adjusted in a manner that could see an increase in our profit oil. Okay?
Sir, also, you mentioned the objective, the IMF objective, and you mentioned that Norway started saving 30 years later. Well, given the net zero transition that the world is looking at, Guyana basically has about 28 years to not just develop, but to benefit from its oil. How does that pan out how does that pan out of the time span and our spending, which is basically more than what we would have received, our budget spending from the oil?
I just gave an extensive explanation precisely.
Even our time frame, sir.
Right. So clearly, Norway waited 30 years when their economy and their people were at a certain level of they had good quality education, healthcare, economy was kicking, the people were living a decent life before they saved for the future. Here, in the original period, you would think that some people were saying we should save every cent now, even though we have so many national needs to be addressed. We had to find a balance between them. There are two extremes. And that is why we have, right at the beginning, committed, if you look at our manifesto too, to a sovereign wealth fund. And from the beginning, we are starting to save based on the formula that is in the Natural Resources Fund Act. So we are now waiting 30 years to establishing a sovereign wealth fund as Norway did. We're doing it almost immediately. We're starting to save. So net zero doesn't mean that the world will not be producing oil and gas. That's another issue that many people believe net zero means net zero. If you look at the IEA study, the IEA study said in a net zero scenario, you will be needing about approximately 25 million barrels of oil per day. Now it's currently 100 million barrels. So we are arguing that the developed world and the current oil producers have been producing for a very long time and supplying the world. That they're the ones who must decarbonize faster. And if there is a 25 million barrel allowance for the world, that you will still need that in net zero scenario. That is for a whole range of activities, including cosmetics industry and other industry. That the developing world, countries like Gabon, Guyana, Nigeria, Suriname, they're the ones who must be producing that in the future. So it doesn't mean shutting down production. So, but your point about we are balancing both interests. We're saving now and we're.
Sorry, is the government concerned that the value of the global oil market will decrease over time, and that might have some effect on the income that we might be getting for the value of crude in the future?
Well, it's anyone's guess, but given that now in the short term, given that world demand for energy is growing, and the pace of supply to meet that demand of fossil fuel, of renewable energy, is not keeping abreast with the pace of growth in demand, then what you will have is a greater demand for fossil fuel energy to be produced. And that's what's happening in the near term. And especially if you take Russia out of the supply mix. So in the near term, I don't see anything on the horizon that will accelerate the pace of production of renewable, point where it starts cutting deep into the supply of fossil-related fuel. But in the long run, the idea is that, yes, we have to plan for that future. And that is why when we say, in this window, we have to accelerate exploration and try to get as much out as possible and utilize the money in a manner to transform our economy, to climate-proof it, to get our people standards of living up, and save some of the money before the window closes or becomes narrow. That is the logic. That is precise logic, what you're working on.
So just for the benefit of my article, can you please state what would be the negatives of this new form of oil company? Because you said the reason you guys look at that is to address setup and fund net zero and all these things. But if you think about it, if it's just a passive ownership, it also addresses the more popular concerns, including the set time, because you just, it's an existing company.
The key thing was, so globally there is a sense that if you own it, it belongs to the people. And some of these companies were set up in a way to break foreign monopolies. I think we're not there in Guyana. So the key variable here, the key variable, we are going to change the PSA. So let me give you, for example, so if we're getting, say, 50% of total revenue now through this PSA, I'm just using figures, not the exact figures, but just to a way of